What do most people do? Unfortunately, especially that are subjected to such environments, well, they're so used to what they have because there's a certainty in it, even though it's an uncertain situation, right? But they're so used to being around poverty. They're so used to the predictability of, well, we don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And next thing you know, to me, that sounds a little bit more dangerous than as opposed to being proactive in your life and trying to actually do something to propel yourself forward and become more of the person that you were meant to be as opposed to just settling for the default.
Try to live well and prosper. Don't trust your doctor. Ruthless with my wordplay. No, I'm not a shotter, but I got them hits, man, coming straight out the barrio. That's why I'm hip hop sicario. I like my privacy. I show out every now and
Welcome back to the Rolo Runs the City podcast. I am your host, Rolo, and I am glad to be back with you guys for another week. And I definitely wanted to make sure that we touched on this topic today. This topic is absolutely important, especially if you are trying to be a man who, not just a male with male biology. I'm talking about a real man, a person that adheres to their responsibilities and they do what's necessary to get the greatest outcome that they could possibly get, achieving the most that they could possibly achieve as a man. And with that being said, you guys already know the particulars, man. Feel free to reach out to me on the socials at Rolo Runs the City podcast, as well as Rolo Runs the City Music at Instagram and on Facebook. And you can also hit me up on TikTok, that is at Rolo Runs the City _, as well as X at Rolo Runs the City. And of course, I am streaming on all major platforms, so y'all feel free to go ahead and check that out. And also, if you want to see the video as well as the audio, you guys can definitely check out the YouTube at Rolo Runs the City, as well as Spotify at Rolo Runs the City. And let's not forget all things Rolo. You can hit up RoloRunsTheCity.com. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this. And this is an episode that is absolutely important. I wish I heard this episode when I was a young buck coming up. Unfortunately, when you live in an environment that's not so disciplined and it's basically all about survival, you don't really get access to this messaging, this information that I'm giving out to you guys, as well as anybody else who's in personal development who's trying to get the word out. Okay. But the title of this episode, of course, was interesting. Your anger is not strength, it's poverty. All right. And I wanted to bring this up. I think it was a pretty good topic I wanted to bring up. And the reason why was because I had seen a recent interview with the singer Mario. And he was talking about how he had kicked somebody off stage because they were disrupting his set that didn't need to be on the stage, which is totally understandable. It's like, hey, you got to get out of here. We're performing, right? But he totally lost his cool. And he was on the interview and he was really like, he was bragging about it. Like, oh, they've never seen that side of me and I don't want to bring that side because, when I get mad and all this other stuff, right? So he was just going on and off. And the problem is that people think that anger equals power. Like, you don't want to see me mad, or dude, if I'm angry, it's a rap. And that's not strength, man. It's actually poverty. And a lot of people don't understand that because a lot of people that are subjected to such behavior, they grow up in dire circumstances. It's all about survival as opposed to thriving. They're not thriving, they're just trying to survive. And much like an animal do out in the wild, they're using their animal instincts to be as aggressive as they could be so they don't become prey to the predator, right? So it's no different in the hood, concrete jungle, whatever you guys want to call it, right? But what they don't understand is that the real strength is in control, and it takes zero discipline to lose your temper. So many people, they wear their hearts on their sleeves, and I'm all about being an advocate for whatever you want to advocate for. But whenever you lose your temper and you start seeing red and there's just nothing but pure rage, that's not strength at all. It just shows that any little thing can set you off. And a lot of times, people make life altering decisions with a few seconds of rage. It can be anything from road rage, it could be a person who can subject their children to child abuse because they just lost their cool, or even domestic violence in reference to hitting their spouse, or just getting into an altercation with somebody you don't even know because they looked at you wrong when you went to the store. And it's not strength at all, man. It's just it's a big sign of weakness, and it's unfortunate that many people, especially in inner city areas, are subjected to such behavior, and they get looked at it as if it's a badge of honor, as opposed to like, man, you lost your cool, man. Like, to me, the guy who's not yelling and is not the rah rah person is the one you really need to be thinking about. Like, this guy's not yelling, this guy's under control, he hasn't lost his cool, the other person's just getting in their face. That person is a dangerous person, okay? And I'm not talking about the one that's yelling and barking. I'm talking about the one that's not. The one that is completely stoic throughout the situation. And that's a well calculated man. And that's a man that I always say to myself, I need to strive to become more of that every day. The inner work is always in there, so therefore this needs to happen, and I hope that people can see things the same way, because what we need is a cerebral society that thinks before they act, respond before reaction. Very big on that, okay? But you gotta understand, anger is meant for survival in most places. I talked about the inner city, urban areas. Unfortunately, socioeconomic classes, certain demographics are subjected to such environments. And I'm not going to say that, oh, it's not their fault. I mean, we're all about accountability here. You hear you know, many athletes, many entertainers. I remember 50 Cent had a song. He said, growing up in the hood, same, man, I don't even remember. I'm so sorry. That's horrible that I just brought him up. But what he just said was, he said he woke up the next morning, somebody stole his bike. It's always the same crap in the hood. And he would run away and wouldn't come back even if he could. Something like that. It was along those lines. And it was it was a great line. But it goes to show you that there's people that want to thrive and they want to be prominent, even though they may be subjected to such environments of survival. So, and that's from the song "Hate It or Love It." I'm not promoting it or anything like that. It's just it's a very good line, because it talks about somebody from the inner city who just is tired of the same old rhetoric, and as opposed to getting angry about it, it's like, okay, let me do something about it. Let me go ahead and get my stuff together so I can get myself out of this situation. So it's all about accountability, and it's all about knowing what you're done putting up with. And many people, they stay in the situations that they stay in because of the fact that they're so comfortable in it, even though it's uncomfortable, instead of getting uncomfortable to be in a comfortable situation. So it's like, I'd rather bust my ass, so then that way I can position myself in the best way possible to be successful. But no, what do most people do? Unfortunately, especially that are subjected to such environments, well, they're so used to what they have because there's a certainty in it, even though it's an uncertain situation, right? But they're so used to being around poverty. They're so used to the predictability of, well, we don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And next thing you know, to me, that sounds a little bit more dangerous than as opposed to being proactive in your life and trying to actually do something to propel yourself forward and become more of the person that you were meant to be, as opposed to just settling for the default. But anyway, I'm a firm believer, he who controls you owns you. And that's not power. Okay. So many people, they just get set off, they get angry, they fall for the, what their kids call now, rage bait. They fall for the rage bait, and they just absolutely thrive in the rage bait. And the reason why I'm saying that is because so many people are very adamant about their own position, who they are on this earth. To me, this is the way I feel, and I always say this all the time. I say, you're already here. You don't have to fight for a position that's been anointed to you. God put you here for a reason. So you don't have to try to prove your place, and you have to say, oh, well, this is where I stand my ground. Like, God put you here. So, like, where I'm at right now is where I'm supposed to be. Okay? So I'm not looking for somebody to push me off. Like, I'm here. This is my space. This is my ground. Nobody's going to push me off because God meant that to be that way. Okay, but so many people are so into, oh, well, I got to protect my reputation and I got to fight for this because this is what I want. It's such a poverty mindset, man, where people don't understand, like, God put you here for a reason, follow through on his plan. So then that way you could be the best possible person that you could be, what he meant for you to be, as opposed to you trying to be fighting the resistance. Look, there's so much resistance enough already in life. You don't need to create your own problem. And most people do that. And unfortunately, many people want you to be accountable for their problems. And that's just what it is. But anyway, yeah. So that's just the way I feel about that. But I'm going to be very honest with you, man. That's one thing that I always talk about, is the fact that people have a habit of just putting their problems on you because they're like, I'm fighting for this position, but I can't fight for it all the way. You think you can go ahead and take care of some of my battles? No, the government doesn't need to take care of your battles. No, they don't need to be paying freaking majority of your rent, and then you're wondering why you're living the way you're living. You need to do better. You need to get up off your ass, and you need to go ahead and figure this thing out and get to work. Now, am I saying that all people are like this? No, there's some people that are facing a lot of hardships, especially financially. That's, without being said. But when you're trying to put forth the best effort, so then that way you can crawl out of your situation, that means by any means, if you're eating freaking ramen noodles every day, if you're putting money away, you're like, damn, I don't even have enough money for this vice that I have, that I buy $6.50 of a pack of cigarettes. Like, dude, I'm just gonna have to go cold turkey because this thing is costing me about 45, $50 a week. Hell, that's almost $200, $300 a month, right? Just on a vice. It's like sometimes when desperate times calls for desperate measures, these are things that you're going to have to do. It just is what it is, right? But you have to be composed, man, and composure is a real power, and you have to use emotions as tools, not drivers. So I will say this, for example, there's so many times where I go into a race and I'm just absolutely I'm kind of thrown off because I'm like, man, I think about the mileage, the distance. Did I get prepared enough or anything like that? I get to that start line and I'm feeling all like kind of anxious and jittery. And it's like I got to own in on my emotions, because if not, I'm going to go ahead and just be no different than a damn Formula One car that tries to go out of the gate and just breaks down right at the freaking damn start line because of the fact that certain things weren't done. It gets over rattled. Next thing you know, that bad boy's pulling off to the side before it even really like left the start line. And I try not to do that. So I think about my training. I think about trying to own everything in, controlling my emotions, so therefore I can put forth my best effort when I do the run. And speaking of run, anyway, let me go ahead and get into that real quick. Dude, congratulations to everybody who took part in the 2026 Atlanta Publix Marathon. This is a marathon that I ran the past 3 years, and unfortunately, I didn't take part in it this year. And the reason why was because I'm still in my recovery mode. I've done a couple of races already since I was, going through my recovery. Thank goodness I did the polar opposite Peachtree, as well as the Thanksgiving 5K out in Atlanta, where they do the half marathon as well, which I normally do that as well. But it's the first time I ever did the Atlanta Thanksgiving 5K, so that was pretty cool. But not to get off topic here, but I will be back next year. So remember that. But no, I really think about that. And there's a lot of people who use their emotions as tools and not drivers, because what happens is if you use your emotion to drive your behavior, it can be very destructive. But if you use it as a tool, it's constructive as opposed to, destruction. It builds. So I think that's what a lot of people need to understand, the difference between the two. You got to think about soldiers, athletes, any great leader, they train in emotional control, right? Let's be honest. You see the greatest of the greats, Kobe, Michael, Brady, all these guys have learned how to create the enemy when there is none, and they own in their on their focus, and they actually use their emotions as tools to create the greatest outcome in their examples: Kobe 5 championships, Jordan 6 championships, Brady 7 championships. So that's exactly what they do. They find that invisible enemy, but they use it in a constructive way in order to get the best possible outcome. Okay, and that's what people should be doing. That's how they train in emotional control. That's what athletes do. Special operators, whenever they're out in the field, whether if it's the SEAL teams or it's your Delta Force, whatever it is, they make sure that they are operational ready. And that means no distractions. And of course, there's going to be distractions there, but you have to have clarity of the mind. And when you're doing that, that means that you have great emotional control and you're using it as a tool in order to get the greatest outcome. And in their sense, accomplishing the mission and coming back home safely with, Lord willing, all body parts, right? But these are how, guys do. And then you have great leaders in society who do the same things. Even though a lot of people end up becoming political prisoners, such as folks like Nelson Mandela, things like that. But to be honest with you, people can recognize what great leadership looks like because they lead with, I'm not going to say so much stoicism, although stoicism takes a great part because they're emotionally controlled. They don't wear their heart on their sleeve to a point where they may become erratic. They don't do that. So that's a great thing. Okay. And, they don't react. They just respond to adverse situations as opposed to just being reactionary. They respond to the adversity. They take care of whatever task is at hand, whatever barrier that may have been in front of them. It completely gets eradicated because of the fact that the emotional control is there and they use it as a tool as opposed to being a driver. People who use it to be a driver, you see protesters protesting out in the streets. We're seeing it a lot in America, of course, because people are opposing the war that they're about to get into or that they're into already. Or people are, they're opposing the war. Maybe they're for it. No matter what. A lot of these people who end up doing these demonstrations, when demonstrations are peaceful, they just want to be heard. That's one thing. But, when you have the demonstrations that happened back in 2020 where they literally burned Minneapolis to the ground, I'm not going to justify their behavior, but do you think that that was an emotional driver, or do you think there was an emotional tool that was being used? I don't think tools were being used. I think they let their emotions drive them to be destructive, and unfortunately, that was the outcome, okay? Everybody, we're all willing, to just put our 2 cents in, and we could all agree to disagree, but that's just the way I see things. I think a lot of people, if they used more their emotional toolbox, they'll know what to use and when to use it, as opposed to using it as a driver. That's just the first thing that comes out, and next thing you know, bam, we just don't know what the outcome is. It is what it is, okay? But a man who loses control cannot lead a family, business, or even themselves. And you have to really think about that, because so many people who are reactionary, they're getting up. It's no different than somebody who's actually getting up to go to work and has not taken a shower, didn't brush their teeth, just threw their clothes on and hit the door. Like right when they woke up. They woke up at 5:15. They got to be at work at 6, and by 5:20 they're out the door. And Lord willing, they don't, get into a car accident, kill anybody, because the equilibrium is not there, and they're still trying to wake up them damn selves, and they do it probably about 5-10 miles down the road. hoping that they're going to be okay with their cup of joe that they went ahead and set up as they went ahead and used the restroom prior to leaving. And they're just hoping for the best possible outcome. And that's not a way to prepare. That's not preparation. And obviously, that's not the way to go. But so many people do that. You know what I mean? And you have to understand, it doesn't mean, we never get angry as men. Of course, men, we get angry. Women get angry. Women get angry a lot. Women get angry at their husbands a lot. Trust me, I know, I go through it, right? But my thing is, you cannot let the anger break you. You have to have it work for you. Okay? A lot of times anger breaks people, and it's unfortunate that it breaks people because of the fact that they could use it, just like I mentioned earlier, examples, as tools to become the best possible versions of themselves that they can be. I mean, and this is not just stuck to athletics and even out in the field, in the military. I mean, it definitely, it serves as business. It serves as being a great leader in your household, being a great wife, a husband, being a great mom or dad. Like, these things, anger can absolutely become constructive if you know how to use it. But so many people wear their heart in their sleeve, man, where they become very destructive. It works against them. They're very reactionary. And next thing you know, they're in a situation where they're like, man, I really regretted that decision. And ultimately, you never hope that it ends up in two places, whether that's freaking death or prison. You know what I mean? Eventually, one of them's coming for us. And we all know that there's a few things that are guaranteed in this life. And of course, is death, taxes, and the Rolo Runs the City podcast, right? But we need to understand too that we can avoid prison by having some great control. A lot of people, there has been a lot of good people who end up in the damn penal system because of the fact that they lost their control for 1 second. They just lost it, and it can really determine the rest of your life. So you don't want to be in a situation where that actually happens to you. So it's good to kind of just breathe, kind of work through it, and keep moving forward. You know what I mean? But how are men supposed to handle anger? Okay, so we talked about how it can work against you or it can work for you. But I think they have to pause before reacting. Okay, we know that. Kind of think, be very cerebral about the situation as opposed to just being reactionary. At the end of the day, we are human beings. We're none of that. Okay. We want to observe the situation before escalation. A lot of times people get so upset, they're like, oh, I want to do this right now. Like, I'm a firm believer that if I'm feeling a certain way about a certain situation, like if I receive a text and I'm like, like I'm really not vibing with this person, I step back away from the phone, and I kid you not, they may not get a response from me for a day. But I know once they get that response, it's because it's clear, it's cerebral, it's not in the moment. So if you text me and I haven't texted you back in a day, it's probably because I'm a little angry about what we're talking about, but I don't want to react in a certain way. I would rather respond with clarity. So that's one of those things that I definitely make sure that I do. And I recommend people to do that as well. Sometimes answer may, it may warrant an answer right there and then. So I recommend, even if that's the situation, just step back, kind of take a few minutes, really think about stuff before you actually compose something. This is something that I not only have I've worked on, but of course I still continue to work on. We always try to do the best we can to master ourselves and what trigger points are going to hit bad and what's not. And we just try to identify the two. And then, of course, we want to go with the less severe, right? That's common sense, okay? And one of the things that we want to talk about, too, is being solution-driven as opposed to focusing on the problem. Okay, so many people dwell on the problem so much that there's no solution in sight. But I'm a firm believer in, okay, we're going to take a couple minutes on this problem, figure out what's going on, then we're going to come up with a solution after that. Because after that, solutions come. But the more you focus on the problem, the bigger the problem gets because there's no solution in mind. So that's one of those things that we have to make sure that we understand as well as men on how to handle our anger. We have to be very solution driven as opposed to dwelling on the issue. Okay? And calm means clarity. And whenever you're calm, you could always think to yourself, okay, I think I know what I need to get done. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Because once you can calm your mind down, hey, it's no different than a quarterback in the pocket who could win 7 Super Bowls like old Brady, right? Game slows down for him. It's no different in life, okay? In life, the game will slow down for people as long as they're willing to calm down their mind. If they're not willing to calm down their mind, they're always going to be frantic. They're always going to be operating in a place of anxiety. That does not work. For a man, that does not work. So you have to understand that. That's something that women can kind of get away with because of the fact that, like I said, they're very complex creatures. So if they're dealing with things of that nature, it's kind of like they get a pass for it, but we don't. So my recommendation is calm your mind down, create some clarity, have a vision, execute on the vision. Okay? So think about it. Next time someone says, oh, you don't want to see me mad, right? No poverty stuff, right? What they're telling you is that they have no control. Okay? They have zero control. And the sad thing is, I was born into situations like that, and I grew up in that situation and just seeing people act that way and being very reactionary as opposed to responding and reflecting on what could have gotten done, what could have been a better outcome. No, unfortunately, this is what people go through. People go through this now. 2026, we still having problems from back when, the inception of man. Let's just be quite honest. You would think by now we would have it figured out, and unfortunately we don't. And I'm not going to say that people don't have it figured out, but I'm talking about society as a whole needs to do better, as in trying to own in on such behavior. Okay? And a disciplined mind always beats an emotional one. So I always want you guys to remember to make sure that you always stay disciplined with your thinking. Respond, don't react, focus on the solution as opposed to feeding the problem, and just be very observant of your situation. Look back, pause before reacting, and then saying, okay, this needs to be properly assessed. This is what people need to do in order to own in on their discipline and become their best self, even when anger arises, because anger arises with anybody. It's not just reserved for the poor, and it's not reserved for the wealthy whenever somebody gets their order wrong at a damn 5-star restaurant. No, it's not, okay? But remember, anger is absolutely a poverty-stricken issue when you want to act out on it. Don't do that. We're better than that. We can become more. We can be better. And if you know better, do better. Anyway, that's my episode for the week, man. This is Rolo Runs the City, man. You guys already know where to hit me up, man. The socials. And remember, folks, be the goat, never sheep, and don't sleep on your dreams. Peace.